Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today we're going to make a jitterbug, and if you don't know what a jitterbug is, it's primarily a freshwater lure, top water. It has a big lip on the front made of metal, and when you reel it along the top of the water, it wobbles around and tends to make a lot of commotion, and it's been a real popular lure for as long as I can remember. I remember having one when I was maybe 10 or 11, and that was a long time ago. Now, a while back, I designed my own jitterbug style lure, and I called it the Wobble Grub, but it's made all of one piece of wood on the lathe. And it actually worked really well when I took it out fishing. It had a nice wobble action and actually caught me a nice fish. And I liked it so much, I actually made a mold of it. But we're going to make a traditional style one with a metal plate. Here's what I think it's going to look like.
Sorry about the background noise in this next segment. It's really raining out.
So here's kind of a rough drawing of what I think it'll look like. The original design tends to be a heavy body, pretty thick near the very front of it, near the head. And that's for buoyancy, because first, this thing needs to stay up out of the water, and that's a piece of metal. And second, it needs to sort of wobble on top of the water, and you don't want a body that's going to tend to want to get down in the water or tend to want to hold it in a line. This is a rough drawing looking straight in from that side. The tie-on-eye has to be high and forward of the wobble plate, and I want plenty of area out on the outside edges of this thing, so as it creates drag and turbulence behind it, it wants to move the lure back and forth and not just up and down. I just want to show you what the relative angle of this wobble plate is going to be, and assuming 45 is something like that. So we're shooting for something like 35 degrees or thereabouts. At 45, it's going to want to push water and pop more than wobble, and anything shallower than 35, it's going to want to hop more than wobble. So there's a sweet spot in there somewhere, and we're going to try to find it. So the plan is to make it 3 1/4 inches long, or 82.6 millimeters long, and the wide point, I want it just forward of the center of the length, and it'll be 15/16 of an inch, or 23.8 millimeters. Now the body obviously I'm going to make on the lathe, but I also had to make a couple other things on the lathe too, and I'm going to go ahead and show you some footage of it, and I want you to guess what I'm going to use it for this build. If any of you actually have figured out what I'm going to use those things for. Here's the wood I'm going to use. This is a piece of camphor. Still has some bark on it. Let's go ahead and put this on the lathe and get shaping. I've got it shaped the way I want it. Also found a bunch of flaws in the wood, reinforced it with some crazy glue, so I think it'll be fine. We'll just take it off of here, take it to the bandsaw, and cut that angle. cut. Now the only thing left to do is to concave this surface so that that lip will fit in there nice and smooth. And that's what I made one of those weird things for. Let me show you. It's kind of a sandpaper ice cream cone. And because I shaped this like the item I'm going to use to shape the metal lip, I can sand this down and I should be able to get a nice match between the metal lip and the surface. And there you go. I got a nice concave shape. Should fit the blade perfect.
And now it's time to make a template to cut out the metal lip. And I'm going to use this piece of blue tape stuck to some wax paper. And I'm going to draw this vertical line to act as a center dividing line for the shape. And I'll use this ellipse drawing guide just to get that general roundness on the outside, and then fill in the rest of it by hand. By folding it in half along the line that I drew, I create a template that allows me to cut it out with scissors, and I end up with a perfectly symmetric shape that's symmetric along that center line. Instead of using aluminum or stainless steel, I'm using this thin sheet of brass that I had laying around. It's the right thickness and it's really easy to work. Now I can just peel off the wax paper backing and stick that piece of tape right down on the metal. Having it all stuck to that piece of PVC board makes it a lot easier to handle while I'm cutting it out on the bandsaw. And I don't really need to cut it super accurate because in the end I'll shape it using the belt sander. And that plastic comes in handy here too. It's really hard to grip just a thin piece of metal and try to get it ground down to the perfect shape.
I'm covered in brass chips and sawdust and you name it. The wood I used for the body turned out to be an absolute disaster. You can see all the spots I had to repair. Any reasonable person would have given up halfway through and got another piece of wood, but I got the brass lip cut out and it looked pretty good for hand cutting and shaping. So now all I gotta do is pull the tape off, and then I'm gonna reveal to you how I'm gonna use that other thing that I shaped on the lathe. We'll use that to shape this. Before we move on to shape this into a nice curve, I want to drill a couple holes in here so that I can use it to fasten it to the face. Alright, let's go beat this thing into a little bit of a concave shape. Alright, so what I'm going to use to shape this thing is an old hitch ball. And I shaped this thing to fit perfectly on the hitch ball. It even has a little indentation there. So we can knock it on there, and that way I can shape that piece of brass into a nice concave shape. Alright, I'm going to kind of hand press it on here and get it to semi-shape so it'll stay put. And then I'm going to give it a couple of love taps with this rubber mallet. Here goes nothing. Well, it looks pretty good in there. Let's just hope I can get it out. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. That's got a nice even concave shape. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the shine and with the way we contoured the body to fit the lip. That worked out perfect. It's all drilling holes from here on in. Alright, that's going to work out. I'm going to have to cut those nails a little shorter, and I'm going to put a bed of 5-minute epoxy underneath it. So I'll spare you all that, and we'll get back to this when I'm beating these nails in. Alright, well, I changed my mind on how I was going to proceed with this thing, and before I mount that wobble plate, I've gone ahead and decided to drill all the holes. I'm going to give this thing an initial clear coat because it is just so beat up. There's just so many repairs that I just have to consolidate this surface, right? I'm going to go ahead and give it a clear coat and probably give that a light sanding too. Alright, let's put some clear coat on this thing. All right, I just got it out of there and it has a surprisingly good finish. So I almost forgot, I really need some eye sockets. So I'm gonna put some eye sockets kind of high on the lure so they're kind of on top, sort of like a frog would have eyes. And sand down the edges of these sockets just to soften things up.
Let's get the blade glued on.
All right, I'm pretty happy with that glue up job. It looks really good. And I think the combination of the brass lip and the little brass nails looks good and kind of unique.
All right, it's time to paint, and I'm gonna go with a classic frog pattern. But first, we put down some opaque white.
I'm pretty happy with that. And those Kermit the Frog eyes really go a long way to make this thing look kind of outrageous. I'm going to go ahead and take off the tape and spray this thing with some polyacrylic to seal the paint, and then I'll give it a clear coat after it's good and set, and then we'll go fishing. Alright, well, there is a storm moving in and it's starting to thunder. Ooh, there's some thunder. We'll probably have to put this off for tomorrow at sunrise, but let's go ahead and see what it looks like in the water. Perfect walk. It's really loud. Just a big burble sound all the way back.
water along the edges is really hot. And I'm thinking pretty low in oxygen, so it's gonna be a little tough to get something to come to the surface, but we're gonna give it a shot. All right, I hooked up just as my GoPro battery died, and I'm running a risk of losing this guy playing around with my phone. But there he is. All right, let me quit fooling around and bring him in. All right, that's a decent fish. All right, let me unhook him and get a release. There we go. All right, did the trick. Alright, well that's the end of this episode. Thanks to everybody who hung out to the end of the video. Not sure what I'm going to build for next week, but you'll see Friday. I'll see you next time.
I don't know what I'm going to say. What the hell? Should have read the script. Blah, blah, blah.